What's going on, guys? Got an exciting goat video for you today. Figured this time I do things a little differently, which is sort of rather than like show you a deck and then explain why the choices are good, I'm actually gonna like start from scratch. This video is gonna be a little longer than usual, and I actually haven't built a deck here yet. You'll see this is blank. I didn't like cheat and write something down of what I'm gonna build, but I'm gonna show you like sort of through the process. Give you a walkthrough of like how I build decks in general. I mean, obviously this is for GOAT format, but this is just really how I build decks generally. So to start off, I'll sort of explain like what my philosophy used to be for deck building and how it changed and why I think it's a lot better. The way that I used to do things and the way that I think most people do things is they sort of like start out with like some sort of like general idea, like some sort of like macro strategy, right? Where they might say something like, okay, I want to build a control deck. And then they'll like start thinking about the micro and go, okay, well, I want to play a control deck, and I like, I don't know, Soul Exchange Monarch or something like that. And then they might start thinking next about like ways that they could fit like meta exploits into that strategy. So they go, okay, I want to play a control deck. I want to play Soul Exchange Monarch. And then they might sort of add, oh, and I also want to play, like, Brain Control, because, like, I can Brain Control a Chaos Sorcerer and banish itself. So that's, like, a good meta exploit. The way that I do things now, though, is, like, kind of the opposite, which is where I think of, like, a way that, like, the meta is open to exploitation, and then I start thinking about the macro strategy, and then I, like, fit in the micro. So right now, anyone who knows anything about GOAT format knows that these, like, Thunder Dragon Chaos decks are very popular right now. I mean, have been for a while, don't seem to be dying down anytime soon. I think if the people who are playing the format were, like, more rational, we'd see much more of, like, a balanced mix, like, more of an RPS kind of meta. But obviously, like, most people aren't rational, and, like, there are no prizes in this game, so people don't have a lot of incentive to be rational. So this is, like, deck that won GOAT format Worlds, and one of the things like I kind of notice is, first of all, this deck isn't like super like out there, right? I mean, we've seen decks very much like this before, and again, they're not going anywhere. But one thing that I noticed is interesting about these kind of decks, and this deck in particular, is he's playing 3 Dakochis and 3 Gravekeeper Spies. So, I started thinking, if everyone's playing like 3 Dakochis and 3 Gravekeeper Spies, and 3 Dakochis in particular is very popular, double spy or triple spy is also pretty popular. Even a lot of GOAT control decks will play double spy. So I figured, like, we could just play like the same thing, like 3 Dakochis, 3 spies, and play like Return from the Different Dimension. And this deck like wouldn't have a lot of ways to deal with this, right? Because you have, odds are one of these things is going to get knocked, whether it's ours or theirs. And we're just going to have, like, 4,000 damage to return at any time. And this guy's also playing, like, Kaiku. And even, like, double Kaiku. Even since this tournament, double Kaiku in the main has been pretty popular. So, it just seems like you can, like, almost effortlessly now, in this current GOAT meta, you can effortlessly, return 6,000 plus damage, right? Like, our Spy gets knocked, that's 36. Maybe we, like, banish 2 things for our own Chaos Monster, and then that's like another 24. Now you're at like 6,000. And the interesting thing here is like these kinds of decks, like they don't play that many ways to stop OTKs, right? Like this guy plays no Scapegoat, doesn't even main deck Mirror Force, got like 1 Torrential to stop OTKs, and Return can play around Torrential pretty well too if you activate it as Chain Link 2 or higher. So like when I start here, I'm thinking, okay, I think we can exploit the meta if we start with a skeleton, of like a couple of returns. 3 Dakochi, and 3 Gravekeeper Spy. And obviously, like, we know that we're going to be playing, like, Cross Out as well. That's kind of a big part of our strategy. And I think that, one of the nice things about going with Return for our kill condition instead of Dimension Fusion, I mean, there's a few things. 1, we always have enough life points for it. And 2, like, this sort of, like, cross-out strategy doesn't really work well with Dimension Fusion, right? Because if we're playing, like, a Chaos Mirror and a Dakochi gets crossed out and, like, we just both banish all 3, well, Dimension Fusion, we just both get back 3, but Return is one-sided. So that's kind of, you know, why we're going with Return instead of Dimension Fusion. So yeah, so we saved our deck. I usually will, like, label my versions when I'm deck building. So here, this is kind of like our skeleton, right? This is how we're gonna exploit the meta. You know, here I'm going with, like, 2 returns because, and this sort of, now we start, like, thinking about the macro here, right? We got our exploit, now we start thinking about the macro. And the macro here is, you know, I think we sort of want to take the approach that Chaos Return decks took in 2006, which is that you kind of have, like, almost a classic sort of combo control deck, where you sort of play the cardage game, you know, trade cards back and forth, go 1 for 1, banish a few things, and then sort of at the end, you know, return all your guys for game to sort of break the stalemate. So that's what we're trying to do here, I think. You know, we're just sort of trying to play a defensive control game. The nice thing is that Spy is a very good defensive control card. It buys us time. You know, in this case, it also happens to be good with our combo card itself. But here, I think we want 2 returns. I don't think we want 1, because 1 would kind of, like, 1's not enough to really, like, capitalize on our strategy, right? With 1, you might not even see it. And then I think, you know, with 3, you're going to draw multiples too often. You can run into consistency issues. So here, I would start with 2. If I'm not sure, I'll usually start with 2. And if I feel like I'm not drawing it enough, I'll start thinking about adding the 3rd. So now we're going to, like, add some staples here, right? So we know, like, we want Pot of Greed. We know we want, like, Graceful Charity. So yeah, this isn't, like, particularly exciting. We know we want Heavy Storm, right? We're playing OTK decks, so we want Heavy Storm. For our other spell or trap removal, I mean, I'm kind of partial to Mystical Space Typhoon. You know, you could go Trunade here, but again, I think we're really gonna play this as, like, a control deck with sort of, like, this return kill condition as the, like, the late game, right? And the nice thing about Return as opposed to Dimension Fusion is that since it's a trap, we can get tricky with it, right? We could attack with, like, multiple things, bait out the Mirror Force, and then still return in the battle phase. So with Return as opposed to Dimension Fusion, I really don't think, like, we need the spell or trap removal as much. Now, one thing that we could consider playing is Dust Tornado. And, you know, it's probably even going to go in the side at a minimum. And the reason why Dust Tornado is good is because we can end phase Dust something and use Dust second effect to set Return. But the problem is that since we're playing control strategy, Dust Tornado is mainly good through, like, getting like hits with your aggro guys through, but that's not really what our deck's trying to do. So, like, I don't think we're gonna main Dust Tornado. And, you know, we know we're gonna have Magician of Faith. We know we're gonna be playing some Chaos Monsters, right? So we are going to have, you know, BLS. We're going to have at least 2 Chaos Sorcerer, and I want to talk about, you know, the number of Chaos Monsters, because I think that is something that's open to consideration. So here right now, I've just got 3 Chaos Monsters in the main and then another one on the side. Now, I think if we're playing Mirrors all day, we just don't need that many Chaos Monsters. The reason being that they're gonna, like, be banishing a lot of our stuff for us, so it's not as important. But in the GOAT control matchup, we really are gonna want the 4th Chaos Monster, because we'll need that to make our return live, and also because, like, we kind of need outs to Thousand Eyes Restrict. That's kind of important. Now, I also think we want to play Mirror and Torrential in this kind of deck, as well as Ring, probably. Ring, I think you could sort of take it or leave it. Mirror and Torrential we want, because again, we're playing a control deck. We're trying to buy ourselves time. So Mirror and Torrential are very important for that kind of strategy. I think this deck actually, yeah, this deck was playing Ring and Torrential, but not Mirror. You know, Ring can kind of backfire on us a little in a, you know, in a return deck. You know, the reason being that if we pay half, like, Ring can be dead afterwards. And same thing with Delinquent Duo, which is why we haven't added it yet. Delinquent Duo will at least be in the side, though, so let's go ahead and pull that out. But yeah, Ring is good, because, again, this deck is probably going to end up being a little soft to Thousand Eyes. So we want Ring to deal with that. Occasionally, you know, Ring can be good with Return, and that we can return, attack them for a bunch of damage, and then ring something for game. So Ring isn't necessarily, like, super insane in this deck, but it's good enough that we still want it. obviously rings like a 9 out of 10 in most decks, and our deck is going to be like an 8 out of 10, but an 8 out of 10 is still pretty good, so I think we're going to play that. We probably are going to want at least a couple of Book of Moons. Book of Moon, of course, one of the most versatile cards in the format. We've also already got like a lot of flip effects here, so you know, Book, of course, is good with that. And again, we're going to need some Thousand Eyes outs in case we run into goat control. We are going to want Sangan, obviously. The Sangan's pretty much staple. We got a lot of good Sangan targets. I think we're also going to want DD Warrior Lady. When I'm building a Chaos deck, I usually count DD Warrior Lady as, like, half a light. So, you know, sometimes it'll end up in the grave, right? Sometimes they'll Raigeki break our Warrior Lady, especially since Raigeki break is more popular than Wing Blast. So DD Warrior Lady does end up in the grave. And obviously, DD Warrior Lady is good with return, right? We just, like, attack a whatever. We attack their Mystic Tomato with our DD Warrior Lady, banish it. Now I've already got one guy for return. And, you know, again, part of our strategy here is the fact that, like, return doesn't really require much setup, right? Like, with the way that the games are going to go, especially in the mirror, like, guys are just going to end up naturally banished, a bunch of them. So DD Warrior Lady is good with that. So that gives us half a light. At this point, we've got, like, 13 monsters. Now, I actually think I'm going to want one Tsukiyomi, which is a little weird. I do like to play one-ofs in GOAT format. A lot of people don't. They look kind of like one Tsukiyomi in a deck list looks kind of ugly. But I like it for a few reasons. One, we've got a lot of flip effects, so we know against any deck we're going to get some value out of it. It is a Sangan target. Like, sometimes I feel like in this deck we are going to want to search Tsukiyomi with Sangan. And also, like, some of these mirrors, like, you got people maining, like, double Kaiku, and Tsukiyomi just kills that. So it's kind of interesting, because a lot of people have been maining Kaiku with the idea that, well, Tsukiyomi isn't that popular, so I can get away with it. But obviously here, again, we kind of exploit that by just deciding to play Tsukiyomi in a spot where a lot of people normally wouldn't really want to. I also think in this deck we're going to want Lightning Vortex. I like Lightning Vortex in this deck for two reasons. One is it clears goats when we're going through game. It clears any field, right? It clears field of double spy, clears goats, you know, clears whatever, you know, Chaos Sorcerer and a monster. You know, if there's a Kaiku that we really need to get rid of, we can Vortex it, you know, just in case. And again, remember that we're sort of trying to play the passive game here, right? We're sort of telling our opponent, hey, you need to attack us. And in those kinds of decks, I like having Lightning Vortex because, especially if they know what kind of deck they're playing, they're going to try to rush us, right? They're going to try to, like, get those monsters through, get some damage in, try to kill us before we can get anything big set up. And Vortex takes advantage of that quite well. So, you know, it works with our control strategy of sort of trying to keep our opponent's field under control, but it also works with, you know, us eventually wanting to go for game. So it serves two purposes, and it serves them both pretty well. Now, Tribe, I think, will probably end up being a side deck card. Because, like, I don't like it a ton against the Chaos Mirror. I mean, it's kind of good because you can, if they have, like, a field of, like, Sorcerer and Spy, those are both spellcasters, and you can clear those. But we mainly just want this to kill goats. It's not light or dark, so I'm not, like, super excited about playing Tribe. But yeah, we've got, like, most of our deck fleshed out here at this point. And now we've, like, kind of run into a crossroads because we're definitely going to need more lights, right? Like, right now, we don't even have enough lights to support a BLS, yet alone, like, 3 or 4 Chaos Monsters. And, you know, it's interesting because I think one of the best lights in this kind of strategy could normally be something like Azura Priest, which could maybe be a side card. So I'll just throw that in here. Like, when I start off, like, the side sort of becomes, like, cards that almost made the main deck, and then later we, like, go back and change it. Now, the problem with Azura Priest, though, well, here are the things that I like about it. One, it clears goats, which is good, because goats could potentially give us a hard time when we're trying to go for game. Obviously, I like it because it's a light. You know, I like it because against Chaos Mirrors, like, especially against Mimic Chaos, they have a hard time dealing with Azura. You can kind of just keep poking them. The problem, though, is that, you know, you can't return Azura because it can't be special summoned. So that I think is going to be a big problem. So, in this meta, if we expect a lot of decks that look like this, Azura isn't super great against this kind of deck, right? Like, you just kind of slam into their set spy. Kaiku has more attack than it does. I mean, you can run over like a breaker, you can run over some tomatoes or whatever, but other than that, it doesn't really do a ton that we're thrilled about. So because of that, again, in this meta, I don't think we want to play Azura. We're also probably going to want Snatch here. And I think we're going to want Breaker. Again, I don't think Breaker is, like, super insane in this deck. But, it kills the spell or trap to clear the way for return, so that's good enough for us. So yeah, so we're at a crossroads. We need some lights. If Azura could be special summoned off return, Azura would be a clear pick here. But instead, we're probably going to have to go with either Thunder Dragon, right? Either Thunder Dragon or Shining Angel. And those people who know me think, well, he's probably going to pick Shining Angel because Alan hates Thunder Dragon and loves Shining Angel. And it turns out you would be correct. I did think about this a little before I started recording this video, and I want to add Angels for a few reasons. One, and I'm going to talk about this because I know some people are going to take my deck and just add Thunder Dragons instead. So I will talk about how I would build the deck if I added Thunder Dragons, because I know people are going to do that. The things that I like about Thunder Dragon here, because there are some, one is that, Thunder Dragon and Night Assailant kind of go well together, right? So if we're adding Thunder Dragon, we would add, like, Night Assailant as well. And of course, we would also add Sinister. And the nice thing about Night Assailant is we got a lot of flips, right? Like, we've already got 8 flip effects, and we might have more. So, we could go something like this, and then that would probably just finish out our monster lineup, right? And, but now the problem is we only got 4 slots left. Now, if we did this, we would definitely have to play Card Destruction, right? That would be one of the main reasons. The main reason to go Thunder Dragon in this deck is that you get to play Night Assailant and you get to play Card Destruction, and Card Destruction would be really sick here. And then we could maybe, like, round this off by playing, like, a few Raigeki breaks or some sort of other discard. We could even consider just moving Tribe to the main. And we could arrive at something like this, right? So we could go something like this, call this Chaos Return version 2. And this looks, like, pretty good on paper, right? We just kind of look like, okay, we got, like, standard Chaos Return deck. Or standard Thunder Dragon Chaos deck, rather. And we kind of threw in 2 returns, and then we just call it a day, right? That's one thing we could do. And here we got, our 5.5 lights. We count Warrior Lady as half a light. And we got 3 Chaos Monsters. So, I think, like, our ratios are pretty good there for the monsters. Now, here's the problem. Here's why I don't want to do this. Now, I actually think this kind of lineup could be good if we expected a lot of goat control. Because, we could sort of, like, play the, Card Destruction game, have our 4th Trinity piece, even though technically we don't even have a duo in this deck yet. So maybe we would, like, cut the 3rd Raigeki break for a duo. And that would work pretty okay. The problem is that, like, Card Destruction isn't very good in mirrors. And, the other problem is, like, we are kind of going to run into some consistency issues here, right? Like, we got 3 Chaos Monsters, we got 1 Spirit, now we've got, like, 3 Thunder Dragons and 2 returns. So that's, like, a lot of ways that we can end up bricking early game. And here, we will definitely be, dedicated to the defensive strategy hardcore, right? Like, our only aggressive monsters here will be, like, Breaker and Warrior Lady, and that's it. But the problem is that, like, Thunder Dragon isn't, like, great as a defensive option, right? Like, it doesn't really do anything. It just sits in your hand. Yeah, it can be Fuel for Raigeki Break, which is a good defensive card. But, like, if we're up against some kind of warrior deck, like, I'm not going to be in love with this. Now, the reason that, I don't want to do this here is, I'll tell you why. One is that we already know we want to play DD Warrior Lady anyways, right? If we were, like, probably not going to play DD Warrior Lady, then the Angels would have a bit of an opportunity cost, right? Because that would cost us 4 slots. But we're going to play Warrior Lady either way, right? And we're going to play Faith either way. So we've already got, like, most of our Angel targets, right? We can just sort of just throw these in here. Now, one thing about doing this is that it makes it much easier for us to play a card that I think is very good in the current meta, and that's a Borg, right? So the nice thing about this deck, the way we have it structured right now, is that we have like a lot of things to tribute for this Saborg, right? We have, spies, Dekochis. Obviously, Angel can just search a random thing to tribute for Zaborg, and Zaborg is a pretty good like return target. It's got 2,400 attack, and again, as I kind of mentioned, a lot of people aren't playing Tsukiyomi, so our Zaborg isn't like super weak here. The other nice thing about playing Angels is that it makes our Book of Moon a lot better. Allows us to just sort of slide the third book in here. And, if there's a lot of people playing, like, Mystic Swordsman level 2, which is a pretty popular card, Angel's pretty good against that, too. You can just summon it and attack. If they got, like, a bunch of Mystic Swordsmen or whatever, they can't deal with that well. Also, a lot of people are playing 3 Dekochis. Angel's good against that. A lot of people are playing, like, 3 Tomatoes. Angel's good against that. So I think the opportunity cost is pretty low. I think in this deck, we probably also want to just throw in Roulette Barrel for a good measure. Because that's like another card that's kind of hard to deal with. It's a solid Angel target. And, it doesn't wall Mystic Swordsman level 2, but it kind of walls, like, most other aggressive options, right? Like, stops Kaiku, stops Azura Priest. If they're just sitting on a bunch of spies, like, we could just roll for barrel every turn until we kill all their spies off. So, it deals with some good things. And, this Angel rather than Thunder Dragon, it allows us to sort of keep our field presence, avoid taking damage, which is kind of what we want this deck to be doing here. So I feel like it goes with the strategy pretty well. It searches Warrior Lady, which banishes itself. So, like, in its own way, Angel kind of, like, fuels the return. And this will just help us do well against, various sort of aggressive decks. Even decks like, Reasoning Gate, Angel's pretty good against, much better than something like Thunder Dragon. So now this deck's looking pretty good. We got like 2 slots left. I think we're pretty much done with the monsters, right? We got like a pretty good ratio here at this point. Zaborg can be kind of hard to get in the grave sometimes. But we've got, 5 lights, 7 lights, 8 lights, 8.5 lights. That's quite a bit. And then we've got, we've got like 9 darks here, which is pretty okay. I mean, sometimes these can get banished, of course. So sometimes we might run into trouble on dark count. The other nice thing about going Shining Angel here is it allows us to add goats and meta to the side. Like, we're definitely not going to have enough room for them in the main. And this really isn't that kind of deck anyways. So we wouldn't really want to do that. But against even things like the Mirror Match, right? Other Dimension Fusion decks, whether it's Reasoning Gate or some sort of Chaos thing, we definitely want Goat's meta against that. Goat's meta can also be pretty good against some of the aggro decks, right? Some of the Mystic Swordsman level 2 decks, the Blade Knight decks. The nice thing right now is that aggro isn't playing very much King Tiger Wangu, so this package here is pretty solid against aggro, whereas a few years ago it used to not be. So yeah, we got a couple of slots left. They're gonna be spells or traps, right? We have to got enough monsters. And really, even this Serpent we don't have to play. Right, for discard we've got Graceful. We've got Lightning Vortex. Yeah, that's really about it. We can, we can discard it to their card destruction. We can discard it to their duo. Serpent also makes Mirror and Torrential better, which we're playing. And the reason why I say it makes them better is because if you have like a Sinister Serpent and a Mirror Force set, the only way for them to deal damage to you is to summon multiple monsters, and then you get them with the Mirror Force. So that's pretty good. Serpent can also not be super great if we see a lot of people main decking the old Kaiku here. So if we see, if we decide that the meta has too many people maining multiple Kaiku, I could actually see just cutting that to the side. And in fact, that might be what we decide to do. Now, I think we do want Duo in the main because, not that great against Thunder Dragon Chaos decks, but it's pretty solid against everything else. And even against Thunder Dragon Chaos, like, it's definitely okay, right? Like, it's not a bad card. I also feel like in these decks, I usually want at least one Sakuretsu armor. Maybe not two, but I think we want at least one. Because again, we're just trying to avoid taking damage, right? We're just trying to, like, you know, not get our spy hit by Mystic Swordsman level 2. So we like Saku for that. We do have 3 books, so I think this might not be a deck where we necessarily need to have multiple Sakus, but I usually do like to have one. Other options here, you know, this could be a kind of deck where we play Jargreed to try to, like, bait some spell or trap removal, make them think it's return, chain Jargreed, and draw, but I'm not super thrilled with that idea. So yeah, so we got, you know, we got our Trinity, we got our spell or trap removal, we got our 2 crossouts, we got our 3 books, we have Vortex Snatch. I kind of like those. For the 40th card, we could just add back the Sinister Serpent, which I think is fine. It does save us a side deck card. Serpent can also do some things. It can also bait Mind Control. By the way, Mind Control is another reason that I like Angel here, because if we turn these Angels into, like, Thunder Dragons, then, like, everything in our deck is, like, a sick Mind Control target, other than DD Warrior Lady, I guess. So we do make their Mind Controls a little worse. We also make their Dust Shoots a bit worse if we go with Angel instead of Thunder Dragon, and Dust Shoot is actually a very popular card right now, both main deck and side deck. So I feel like playing the Angel makes our deck, like, a bit more well-rounded and sort of more prepared for what our opponents are going to be throwing at us. So yeah, just trying to think what the 40th card should be here. Like, I don't think we want a second Tsukiyomi. I think one's just enough. You know, we got a few good targets. Tsukiyomi also kind of good with Angel, right? They can attack our Angel, we search Faith, and then we Tsukiyomi it. That's always nice. So we definitely do have plenty of Angel synergy. Now, one option that we could do is we could add, like, Magical Merchant. Just say, hey, we're just gonna go with, you know, 1 Merchant. But actually right now, if we wanted a monster, we would probably need a Dark more than a Light. And yeah, like, the Merchant is an okay Angel target, but we don't have metas in the mains. We're not really going to be going, like, Angel into Merchant into meta. And this is also, since we're only playing 3 Chaos Monsters, I think this is the kind of deck where, like, we don't really want to, like, mill them too much. So there's a few ways you could round off this deck here. So let me save this deck as, you know, Chaos Return version 3. And for the last card, you know, I think you could go with Sinister. Right, we could go with Sinister. That's one option. Main downsides to doing so is that we make our opponent's Kaikus a lot better. Upsides to doing so, Sinister is a very good card against aggro. It baits Mind Control. You know, sometimes we will have, like, Graceful or Vortex, but not super exciting. One option would be to just say, boom, 3rd Chaos Sorcerer. I mean, now this looks pretty good on paper, right? Downsides, you know, we do make our deck a little less consistent in the early game, right? We got a lot of these, you know, we're having 4 Chaos Monsters and 2 Tributes, which would be a bit ambitious, right? Be a bit ambitious. However, we do have a lot of good turn 1 cards, right? Like, Angel's a good turn 1 card, so is Dakochi, so is Spy. Even Roulette Barrel is a pretty decent turn 1 set. Sometimes in the Chaos Mirrors, you know, we're just going to be banishing each other's stuff so much that we just won't really have the food for that. So, not super thrilled with Chaos Sorcerer. You know, I'd want to have the 3rd Chaos Sorcerer against Goat Control. I'd want to have the 3rd Chaos Sorcerer against something like Zombies, if we ever run into that. Or even like a Chaos Recruiter deck. I think I would want the 3rd Chaos Sorcerer. But against, like, your average Thunder Dragon Chaos deck with main Kaikus, I'm not super on board with playing the 4th Chaos, or the 4th Chaos Monster. Now, another option here, you know, we could add another trap, right? We could just go 2nd Saku, and that might be what I decide to go with. And if we, you know, sort of made our deck look like this would be very, very similar to what sort of Chaos Return decks kind of looked like in 2006 or whatever, right? Now, they didn't play Gravekeeper Spy, and they had, like, Cyber Dragon to play instead of, like, Shining Angel. But other than that, this is kind of what Chaos Return decks used to look like, you know, way back in the day, way back in 2006 when Chaos Return was, like, the best deck. They definitely love their Sakus. Crossout was at 2 then. You know, Pot of Greed and Duo were banned, but like otherwise, this was kind of like what their decks would look like. And Tsukiyomi was limited to 1, so usually they just play one of those. Obviously, here we could play more if we wanted to. But yeah, you know, another option here is rather than play the second Saku, we could find another Dark, right? So, and the reason why is, like, if both the Dakochi and Spies get hit by Crossout, that really only leaves us with, like, 3 Darks for our Chaos Monsters, which isn't a ton. Now, on one hand, not super big deal, because we only have 3 Chaos Monsters anyways. And then, obviously, if both these are banished, we know our return is going to be very live. But it is a potential concern. So, another thing we could do is we could add Cyberjar. And that has some things going for it. We do have a lot of good Cyberjar targets here, right? Like, almost everything in our deck is a good card to hit off Cyberjar, other than maybe the Breaker. Tsukiyomi would have to go to our hands, as it can't be special summoned. Obviously, something like Zaborg, we can't special summon off Cyberjar. But Cyberjar is okay. I think this could be one direction that we could go here. We could definitely just go with Cyberjar. Downsides... You know, if we're up against, like, a deck with a lot of, like, Blade Knights or Mystic Swordsman level 2s, does give us a few things they can kind of hit now. We now have, like, 6 Blade Knight targets and a lot of Mystic Swordsman level 2 targets. I also am not super in love with Cyberjar for mirrors, because, like, it helps us, but it kind of helps them, right? Like, most of their things are good Cyberjar targets. So yeah, so I don't really think I want Cyberjar. I actually think against something like Goat Control, it could be okay. But even with Goat Control, like, you know, we probably just give them a scapegoat off Jar, and then it's hard to OTK them. Even against something like Reasoning Gate, against Reasoning Gate, Cyberjar is actually very good, because you just kill their whole board, and usually they just special summon, like, nothing off Cyberjar. But yeah, not super in love with Cyberjar. So I think... You know, this would probably be the safest choice. Yeah, our deck looks pretty clean on paper. We end up with, like, 21 monsters, 12 spells, and 7 traps. And I definitely kind of am a fan of Sakuretsu Armor in general. You know, it goes with our game plan of sort of just stopping them from killing us. But, you know, again, we have the 3rd Book of Moon, so it's like, I'm not super sure. Like, honestly, I think the last card should either be the 2nd Saku or the Sinister Serpent. Pretty hard to say which I like more. But I think it's fine for now. There are a lot of decks where, like, we're just not going to really be in love with our Sinister Serpent. So, I think this is fine. And then, you know, to think about the side deck, what's this stuff I actually do want in the side deck? Obviously, if we're siding Goats in meta, we obviously are going to side Serpent with it. Obviously, like, some of our cards that we're going to side, we would prefer to have, like, Lights and Darks for monsters. You know, we do have Tribe here, which I like against Goat Control, and that's obviously not cast typed. I think our deck could be a little soft against Reasoning Gate. We've got some good stuff against Reasoning Gate. Like, Spy will hold them off, Angel will hold them off. Return is pretty good against Reasoning Gate, just because, like, I don't know. It's alright, I guess. So I'll have to see. Like, for this deck, first of all, for the mirror, like, at this point, our deck is pretty much built for the mirror. The only thing we'd really want to side out for a mirror would be, like, Delinquent Duo. That's, like, the only card here that I would consider siding out. So we could have maybe one Spell or Chop that we side for the mirror. Like, we could maybe side, like, one Mind Control. And say, okay, in the mirror, we're gonna, like, side out Duo for Mind Control. That's one option. Mind Control is pretty good when you're both playing Spy, right? Because you can Mind Control their set Spy, flip it, and get yours. So that's kind of good. We like that. So I think we want that. Oh, no, we don't really want to side anything for the mirror. Like, in GOAT format, people used to say, like, oh, you main for Goat Control and side for everything else. Now that, like, Thunder Dragon Chaos has, like, kind of taken Goat Control's place in the meta, I feel like sort of the same philosophy applies, but just with Thunder Dragon Chaos taking the place of Goat Control, right? Like, if you're siding, like, 5 cards against Thunder Dragon Chaos, that's probably too many, right? You should maybe side like somewhere between 1 and 3. Most of your stuff that you'd want for that matchup should be mained. So yeah, we're not going to side Dust Shoot. We don't really need it. Yeah, Mind Control looks fine. The other thing we could consider siding out for the mirror is like double Saku. Like, is it really that great in Chaos Mirrors? I mean, sometimes you like hit Kaiku, which is nice. Sometimes you hit Azura Priest, which is nice. But other than that, like, we're not super in love with Saku for the mirror. So yeah, so we got some stuff here, for sort of like the alternate sort of win con matchups. Like, we got Dust Tornadoes for burn. I think Jinzo could be good. Obviously, Jinzo can be very good against burn decks. Even against an aggro decks, it can be pretty decent. And then it also, like, kind of works with Return. So I feel like Jinzo is a pretty solid card. I feel like we want Jinzo. Probably got, like, we're maining, like, 7 traps, so, like, I don't really want to, like, side in a bunch of decrees in most cases, but Jinzo's fine. This isn't, like, a super hardcore Return deck, right? We're mostly just sort of, like, a Thunder Dragon Chaos deck with some Return splashed in. But Jinzo's good with Return, so we'll side Jinzo. Against Flip Control, Jinzo's pretty good, even though not a lot of people play that anymore. You know, we could go with something like Curse Seal, Forbidden Spell, or Magic Jammer for some of the OTK decks. We've already got Scapegoat meta for Reasoning Gate, which I like. What are Ric Flair was siding? Yeah, most of these cards I actually don't think we want. Like, we don't... Yeah, like, 3 Mind Controls is way too many. I mean, we could side Kaiku for the mirror, but I just don't think we need it. Like, I think Kaiku... It's good in the mirror, but I think it's a little overrated. Most decent players are going to be able to just deal with it now. Even our deck, like, has a lot of ways to deal with Kaiku. We got Tsukiyomi. We got Spy to Wall. We've got Roulette Barrel to Wall. We can Tribute for Zaborg and kill it. We can Snatch Steal it. You know, we can Saku it. So, like, I'm not worried about Kaiku. If the other person's decent, they shouldn't be that worried about Kaiku either. So I don't want that. Yeah, I mean, we probably want some stuff for aggro, I'd say. Like, we already have Goat's meta, which is pretty good against most aggro decks. We're also maining double Saku, which is good for aggro decks, but we could have even more anti-aggro cards. And to be honest, I wouldn't hate 1 Skilled Dark Magician for aggro, and I'll tell you why. And I normally don't like siding this card against aggro, but a lot of the aggro decks are maining Kaikus now. And it attacks over Kaiku, which is good. We can summon it and not have to worry about Mystic Swords on level 2, which is good. And, yeah, I mean, it's just... I mean, Blade Knight attacks over it, but, like, other than Blade Knight, Skilled Dark kind of attacks over everything else. So it could be okay. I don't know. I don't think Skilled Dark is, like, the most insane side deck card in the world. But, it's definitely on the table. It's definitely on the table. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. The fact that I can't come up with very many good side cards is actually like a good thing. It's better to like be like, oh, my deck can already... The main deck of my deck can like already beat everything. You know, I don't need any side cards. It's better to be in that position than be like, oh, my deck has 1,000 weaknesses. I need like 30 different side deck cards to cover them. So for the most part, yeah, like we're kind of prepared for anything. Like we could, you know, side in something, you know, over like Saku for the mirror, you know, rather than just 1 Mind Control over the duo. We could side 2 Mind Controls. I definitely don't want 3. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think our deck is, like, pretty solid. So yeah, I mean, Empty Jar, I think, has gotten a little more popular lately, so we could side, like, 1 Nico Mane King, but I feel like most of those decks are just kind of prepared for it, you know? So yeah, it's kind of a tough spot. I don't hate, like, Cursed Seal. Don't hate Cursed Seal. So we can like put in one of those. Curse Seal is also like kind of decent against Gravekeepers. If you can ever Curse Seal their Necro Valley, that's pretty sick. And some people still do play Gravekeepers. So yeah, so often like when I start off building a new deck, my side deck kind of looks like this. Just kind of like a bunch of one-ofs, kind of some cards that I think might be good. And then we test them and try them out. And then probably within like a month or two, the side deck changes by like 5 cards. You know, we definitely know that like we want most of the stuff over here to the right. I mean, Azura Priest we don't have to have. Azura Priest could go, but like against Goat Control, I think I kind of like it. Even against Reasoning Gate, Azura Priest can be okay depending on their specific list. So yeah, I'd probably like round out the rest of the side with some like kind of hate for like alt-win decks. Even like for burn, having like 2 Dust Tornadoes and a Jinzo, you can make the case that's not really enough. That we should like have something else. Don't necessarily know what it would be. Even something like Zingzenku, I think we could play. Because I like this card against aggro, because aggro will usually set a lot of back rows against us, and we can just try to 2-for-1 them. Problem is, aggro could side in Mobius, which could be a bit of a problem. And then this is like also okay against burn. I don't know. I mean, if like Jinzo wasn't restricted to 1, we would probably just side a second Jinzo, but obviously that's not an option. So it's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to say. You know, if we want to be on the safe side, you know, we could add, you know, this Curse Steel, we could make it a Magic Jammer. We could just like add like double Magic Jammer to the side. We could probably just side a second Mind Control. I think this is fine. In the mirror, we'd probably just end up siding out a duo and 1 Sakura for 2 Mind Controls. And Mind Control is good against some other decks too. Like Mind Control is pretty good against like Flip Control if we ever run to that. It's good against Pac-Man if we ever run to that. It's even good against some burn decks. You can like Mind Control or set Desk Koala. You know, do something like that. So yeah, we could go like this. But yeah, this is kind of the process that I use to build my decks here. We sort of start out from the exploit. We sort of, you know, flesh it out, add our staples, get an idea of our general strategy. And then, you know, towards the end, we sort of decide on, like, the last card or two. It kind of took a while to decide on the last main deck card and the last side deck card. But sometimes the deck's like that. Obviously, here we also have to, like, add our fusions for whenever we side. Yeah, right, we're gonna have, like, some Thousand Eyes. We need level 5s and level 6s. Because he runs Zaborg and Chaos Sorcerer. But yeah, this is how, like, this is kind of the thought process that I use when I build my decks. You know, I don't think this deck's, like, best deck in the format or anything, but I think it's, like, pretty good deck in the current meta. I think it's probably better than, like, most of the Thunder Dragon Chaos decks that people are playing. I think, like, you'll do pretty well against those. You know, if it's, like, even skill on both sides, you probably go, like, 60-40. Just because, like, you have the returns and the Zaborg. People don't realize how good Zaborg is in, like, the Chaos Mirror right now with the cards people playing. So, yeah. This is kind of my thoughts. And this is sort of how, like, I build decks, like, so well the first time. Like, obviously, like, Angel Chaos, I kind of, like, popularized that deck. Really didn't change it very much. Like, I think I changed it, like, 2 cards from the original builds. Mimic Chaos, also a deck that I built. Like, I don't think I've changed it at all since the original build, although other people have. And yeah, it's just kind of the way that it is. I start from the exploit, and then I sort of worry about everything else afterwards. So yeah, let me know what you think about this deck. You guys should definitely test it. It is a pretty sick deck. And I think it's definitely very good in the meta right now. So yeah, try it out and let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.